The Brooklyn Vegan Show is a podcast about music brought to you by the music blog and online record store Brooklyn Vegan. Make sure to subscribe to hear all of our upcoming episodes featuring interviews with musicians and more, and find us 24/7 at brooklynvegan.com, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hey, welcome back to the Brooklyn Vegan Show. I'm BV editor Andrew Sacker, and today's episode is about a list that we recently put up on brooklynvegan.com called 25 Classic Emo and Post-Hardcore Albums Turning 10 in 2023. Joining me to talk about these albums is Drew Barringer. Drew currently writes for Chorus FM, which used to be called Absolute Punk, and Drew was there in the Absolute Punk days when the albums on this list and the bands on this list were just starting to come up. It was a really exciting period. I mean, we're talking about albums like Touche Amores Is Survived By, Citizens Youth, The Wonder Years, The Greatest Generation, Balance and Composure, The Things We Think We're Missing, Foxy and the Albatross, The World Is Whenever If Ever, etc. And this was the era where there were just classic albums from this scene coming out left and right, and the scene was really starting to get picked up by bigger music press. Drew at Absolute Punk, he'd been talking about these bands for years, so he's brought a lot of great perspective to the table. This was a really, really fun conversation just to relive this era with Drew, and I hope you enjoy it. But before we get to the chat, just a little bit about our sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid is a service for musicians that allows you to easily upload your music to all major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Music, and more. DistroKid allows you to do automatic revenue splits, so collaborators and co-writers can get paid too. It provides you with an artist page that links to your music on all streaming services. It allows you to add lyrics, credits, and liner notes, and more. You can get 30% off of your first year's membership by signing up at distrokid.com/VIP/BrooklynVegan. We've also included the link in the description of this episode, and you can click directly from there. We've also included the link to the list of emo albums that we're talking about in this episode. So check that out, read along with us as we talk, and here's my chat with Drew. All right, so hey Drew, what's going on?
Hey, it's finally awesome to get to talk to you, like outside of Twitter about music and stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's always like nice to meet like a, face to face with a fellow music nerd slash writer
Oh
slash
yeah,
lover. Like,
absolutely. I'm really excited.
yeah, me too. So we're talking about emo and post-hardcore albums that turned 10 this year, uh, in relation to a new list that's up on brooklynvegan.com. And Drew, before we get started, before we jump in, why don't you just sort of tell people like a little bit about your personal background with this era and like, absolute punk and all the kind of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during this time, I was living in Los Angeles as like the de facto senior editor of AbsolutePunk.net, um, working in the Spin Media offices. So yeah, I had a lot of hands on with a lot of albums from 2013, like living in the peak of it, getting to see a lot of these bands perform these songs live, living in Los Angeles. Obviously, they all kind of came through. And AbsolutePunk.net had a big hand in like song premieres and discussion on it. I mean, honestly, this was like around the time that like other sites like like Pitchfork started covering it more because Ian Cohen did a lot of coverage of it. You started to see it kind of spread to other websites more than Absolute Punk, and like this is like that era of music that kind of like kicked it off like all the coverage of it. Like I mean, even like Brooklyn Vegan probably covered it a lot more. I think Stereogum started covering it a lot more. Not that those sites never covered it, but it became more of like somewhat of a focus and like an afterthought. Whereas like Absolute Punk, that was like just the main focus of the site. So that was kind of like the place where a lot of people discussed it. Um, so yeah, it was crazy just kind of like being involved in a lot of that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, being on the Brooklyn Vegan side, like you said, like we had definitely covered it in the past, but it certainly started to become more of a focus around this time for us and similar websites like Stereogum, Pitchfork, NPR. Not to say that we're similar to NPR, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
but what was your perspective like seeing that happening as somebody who was like, well, I've always been writing about this?
It's really easy to be like real jaded or am I allowed to swear on this
Yeah,
podcast?
yeah, totally.
Okay, just sorry. don't want to pay extra work for the editor.
Right.
It's you could be really jaded or like shitty about it, be like, well, Absolute Punk was always the first, but like I always thought like, well, you know, people are always snarky towards like people who like emo and pop punk or punk. Like I remember like people looking down on it when I liked it, like in high school and grade school. So I was trying not to be like a pompous asshole about it. It was definitely curious. We like Jason Tate and I would have like a good laugh about it, but it was never like a mean spirited. At least I approach it like this is sick. Like my friends in these bands are getting reviewed on Pitchfork. They're getting attention on Stereo Gum. Rolling Stones doing a feature on this. Like you gotta like for me, I try to think of everything happening around me much bigger than me or even the website. And I just thought about the bands I loved and my friends in those bands getting like much deserved attention. Because back in the day, like we're bitching about Jimmy Eat World Bleed America getting like a 2.0 on Pitchfork. It's like, okay, now is survived by Touche's getting an 8.0. Like you can't have it both ways and be mad about both of them. So it was just cool. Like I just took it from that perspective. I thought it was super sick that it was more than just our website. And if anything, our website kind of helped a lot of those sites like get more information about because they could, read our forums, read our news posts, stuff like that. Because obviously a lot of the press releases that I was getting was skewed toward that genre. So a lot of times we were the first site to post a lot of that stuff until those PR companies got hip to it and started giving more press releases to the bigger sites, which again is great. You want everyone to be successful, especially in the genre of music like emo and post hardcore. That's not really like financially stable at all times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I felt similarly. Like, I mean, I think as an emo kid, you just kind of always have a chip on your shoulder because, like, y- for the most part, I think you're just never going to be taken as seriously as you think the music should be taken. And yeah, like, growing up reading like Pitchfork trashing Full Collapse or something, I'd be like, what is wrong with them? It's like, and then yeah, you start to see like this era, like all this stuff was like, hey, wait, like this music's actually really important and really good, and like we're gonna take it seriously and not like make jokes about just the genre they are. And like it was a weird yet very awesome time, I think.
Yeah, and it's like then you like think like the last couple of years, like Pitchfork commissions Ariel Gordon to write about Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge. Like that's like so cool. I love that
Hmm.
stuff. Like I'll never have like a negative bone in my body about stuff like that. I'll never be jealous about it or upset about that. I just think that's so cool. Like and that's like a generation of writer who's younger than me. Like I'm 37, so like that's another cool part. It's like this person could have been posted on Absolute Punk, and that website could have been the reason why they want to get into writing. And wow, look, they're writing for Stereo Gum or Pitchfork or all kinds of different sites, and that's really rewarding for me, if anything.
Yeah, I was like genuinely stoked when Pitchfork finally reviewed Enema of the State.
Yeah,
Like, I was like, "No, this is like a monumental moment in my life," like, they got, like, a 7.5, which is kind of funny because I almost feel like if you're gonna take that album seriously at all, like, how could it possibly be better, than it is? Like,
right, right, right.
but, like, for what it was being, but at the same time, I was like, "Okay, that's a positive score, it's a positive, well-written, like, fair review," and I'm like, "That's so cool," because like I just feel like I spent years being like, hey, like that band actually matters to a lot of people, and like it felt was like an uphill battle as a writer, like I remember like
Yeah,
the just
absolutely.
not to like make this about Blink 182, but I
Right,
remember that the first time I wrote about them in a serious way on Brooklyn Vegan, like I mean there was like visible backlash. And like now, like they have like the hottest upcoming tour of the year. It's on like all the anticipated tours of 2023 lists. Like it's such a different world now than 10 years ago when like
right.
and on that note, let's talk more about 10 years ago. So, I mean, there's
Yeah,
a lot of cool records, both on the Brooklyn Vegan list and ones that probably aren't that we'll talk about. But just like before we get into it, just to name a few, just, kind of give people an idea of like what we're actually talking about here. Stuff like Touche Amores is survived by Super Heaven's Jar, Pity Sex, Face of Love, Restorations, LP2, Citizen Youth, Balance and Composure, The Things We Think We're Missing, The World Is, Whenever, If Ever, Wonder Years, Greatest Generation. The list goes on, but that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. I think before we get into like somebody really specific, tell me from your perspective, like where you saw like just sort of the scene at this point, because these are like this was a year where a lot of bands really, I think, leveled up. Like
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Like I was looking through the Brooklyn Vegan list again, and at one point in time, I probably had every single one of those records on vinyl, uh, which is like just funny to think. I had the original Super Heaven jar with the saying Daylight on it.
Hmm.
Like that's cool. But like, yeah, I think it was a weird transition period because like Fall Out Boy is on hiatus. My Chemical Romance has been on hiatus. Um, Brand New hadn't put out anything in a while. So like that kind of like prior, you know, era of like what was popular at least on AbsolutePunk.net was leaning more into like that emo or post hardcore and like I remember writing about parting the sea between Brightness and Me and it not having like a big reaction or like people just not understanding it. And then to see like, those bands level up, like there's a lot of second albums, debut albums, third albums on the Brooklyn Vegan list. And those are a lot of the albums that those bands are remembered by, or were some of the only, maybe the last record they wrote or the only record they wrote. So it was a really exciting time because you could definitely see like the sea change and like what our website and other sites are really wanting to talk about. And you could really give a lot of credit to, the year before of Title Fight with Floral Green. I think
Hmm.
that and Pianos Keep You was really popular. Not Keep You, The Lack Long After was really popular in 2012 on our site. And that kind of like, when we started seeing more of the forum posters and like other reviewers talking about it, I was kind of like, I think this is about to kind of get big. Like it's pretty incredible, like seeing Title Fight like getting all this recognition for Floral Green because like Shed's a great record, and I remember covering that record. And there's people liked it, but it wasn't what it was like when Floral Green came along. So it's interesting to think what caused that shift. I just think it was just a lot of bands that people liked growing up were either inactive or taking forever to release music, and everyone's taste changes as you get older. And I don't know. It's just really cool. It's really incredible to think how many iconic records from this era all released like in like a 12 to 16 month period.
Yeah. I definitely agree. I think floral green is, I mean, there's never one thing responsible for like something happening like this, but I think floral green was a really, really pivotal moment. I mean, first of all, I think Saragon might have premiered Head in the Ceiling Fan. And I think that might have been like the first time Title Fight was mentioned on like a
Hmm.
non-punk website. And also that's like, a shoegaze song. So
Yeah.
like there was that happening. So it wasn't just like, oh, emo is okay now. It was also like, well, these bands were growing and they were getting into different music. Like, I just spoke to Ned from Title Fight for a 10th anniversary piece on Floral Green, and he was like, yeah, like we were still into like Lifetime and Kid Dynamite, but we were getting into like Sonic Youth and like
Hmm.
Sebado, and that's like what was happening. Like I recently on this podcast spoke to Barry from Joyce Manor, and he was like, I just wanted people to understand from listening to our music that we like Enema of the State, but also Slumberland Records. And I think
Right.
that's like what was something that was happening was there were these bands that were coming out of punk that were like also really into indie rock, and they were
Hmm.
really kind of a lot of these bands were making the best indie rock records of this time because not only to your point about My Chem, Fall Out Boy, like the bigger bands in like emo or whatever pop punk or post hardcore, like a lot of them were fading away, but it was also like indie rock in 2013 was like not rock, it was like
Hmm.
churches,
Right.
like, and like that's fine, but if people wanted like louder guitar records that might maybe sounded like Dinosaur Jr. or Nirvana or like you know bands that were totally within the conversation of like quote indie rock, like a lot of it was happening in this world.
Yeah, it was. I remember watching in late 2012 when I was living in Los Angeles. I saw like Title Fight opened for Quicksand on their reunion tour at the Fonda Theater, which kind of makes sense because obviously like Walter produced Shed and everything. But like even like thinking like the first time I saw Title Fight ever play, they were opening for Newfound Glory in a small theater here in Indianapolis when I was in college. And now I'm seeing them at the Fonda Theater opening for Quicksand. Like, yeah, Newfound Glory is a big band, but it's like Quicksand, the Fonda Theater, and seeing Title Five's direct support was kind of like another like light bulb moment where you're like, oh, this is something that's about to be like really real, like in this genre.
Yeah, and I think I mean, even just seeing these bands live at all was like that was another thing. It's like because this was all happening like under the radar of most people in the music industry outside of places like Absolute Punk, Property of Zach, Punk News. Like, so like, I remember seeing Touche Amore on To the Beat of a Dead Horse for like 50 people or something, and then seeing them on Parting the Sea for like 250 people. And just watching them become like an amazing live band who'd played hundreds of shows before ever getting like a real record review outside of like their niche, like
Hmm.
so that's a big difference too. It's like a lot of, since the blog rock era, you'll get these buzz bands where it's like, oh, like one MP3 hits the internet, you haven't even played live yet. Like just like so I'm a huge Cloud Nothings fan, so this is not to diss Cloud Nothings, but their
Right.
first show happened after they'd been hyped. Like they were like they put up something on like MySpace, I think,
Right.
and
Yeah.
they got like buzz on blogs, and then like Dylan got an invite to like fly to New York and play, and he like assembled a band for it. But these are and like and they became
Yeah.
one of like the great live rock bands of their generation. But these bands had played like 100 shows at least before anybody was talking about them, and that was so different. I think about this scene, like this scene was just like making itself, it wasn't like there wasn't worried about record reviews or really song premieres, like again outside of places like Absolute Punk, like but it was so self-sufficient and so live oriented and just like so DIY, and it was just like an amazing special moment, I think.
Yeah. I think what I think about a lot about that era is like there are certain shows I got to see in certain venues that I'll never see these bands play again. Like 2013 was also the year like Touche went on tour with AFI. Like AFI brought him
Hmm.
out on that Burials tour, which is like I remember talking to Jeremy about that. He's like that it's just like he's like this is insane that we're playing like for AFI. But like I remember like in Los Angeles who went to the like this Los Globos bar in the basement. The stage was probably 2 feet high, and that's where Touche and Balance played their record release shows for the things we think we're missing and is survived by. Like that would never be able to like if Balance decided to come back and tour on this record and Touche decided to do it is survived by record, they would not be playing a venue in the basement of a bar. Like it's just like
Yeah.
incredible to think like seeing those bands play in those kind of um, rooms or venues, like it'll never be like that intimate again.
Yeah, I spoke about this actually with Barry from Joyce Manor on this podcast a few months ago. Like when they put out the self-titled debut record, they played this now defunct DIY venue in Brooklyn called Party Expo, which is like very, very, very small and very DIY. And when they did the 10th anniversary show in New York, they played Central Park. Like that is like the biggest jump from the venue you played when you put the record out to the 10th anniversary show I've maybe have ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy because I think even before I kind of miss like the big package tours back then too. Like
Hmm.
there was it was at the Nokia Theater in downtown Los Angeles. It's probably called something different now, but that's like it's like when Circus Survive was like at their peak, and they brought out Oh Brother, Balance, and Touche on that tour, and it's just like that was probably like one of the bigger venues those bands had ever played at. Thinking about that era of like 2012, and you just don't see those type of shows anymore. But yeah, I did have this big smile on my face. I'm just like remembering. It was like such a incredible, just an incredible time to be like living in that era of music.
Yeah, and I also really loved like just when these bands kind of started doing their own package tours, like without a veteran headliner. Like I
Hmm.
remember seeing like I think it was La Dispute Title Fight Hotelier was a tour, like,
Yeah,
and it would just be like different sort of variations of like the same kind of 40 bands. And but it was just awesome because you're like, oh yeah, like this and like it's like we don't. It's like yeah, it's fun to go out and play for AFI and make new fans, and that's amazing, and also just great bill, but it's just also so cool to be like, hey, like we're all the same age, we're all relatively new, and we're just gonna like put four of our friends on a show, and it's gonna draw like 500 to 2,000 people depending on the city because our scene is that exciting.
yeah. Then like now, like Touche Amore or like the Wonder Years, they're like the fathers of like the scene now. Like they're the ones who are
Yeah.
like because last year Touche like they took out Vane FM and like Skull and like Third Phase, like all these other up and coming bands, like it was for them on their nationwide tour last year. And it's just like it's cool when that happens. And I love it when they take out the new generation of bands because we all love like the buddy tours too. But it's also like I think when you get to a certain level of being in the scene as like a band like Touche Amore or the Wonder Years have been, I think they think the same way. It's like kind of like your duty to bring like out the next generation on these tours. And it's just rad to see that like kind of like those full circle moments coming around like 2023 and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think you have to give back and like not, and also like, you don't want to just seem washed up or it's like, oh, like those like monsters of rock, like bunch of veterans on tour together. Like, no, it's like
Right.
use your platform because you were that young DIY band with 100 fans at one point too. And that's, like these bands all remember that. And most of these people, like Jeremy is just like such a music lover. I mean, I don't think Jeremy would want it any other way than to
Mm-mm.
like to have the like ability to have a platform to bring out a band like the ones you just named, like it's I think that they probably love that as much as they love playing their own music.
Yeah.
um and yeah, I mean it is surreal to me to see these records having 10th anniversaries because I mean this is also too like, you know when this era did start to hit mainstream press, this is when the term emo revival started to become a big word, which I feel like I've written this before, but I'm just gonna like say it again. Like that term was originally meant for like bands like Algernon Cadwallader and Snowing and like literally
Right.
bands reviving an old style of emo. And then it just
Yes.
became used for like any band under the wide umbrella of emo or punk or post hardcore that was kind of new and like was considered cool now. Like, like, and again, like a lot of the records on this list, not all of them are emo. Like the Wonder Years are a pop punk band. I feel like they've like come in to be like like they fit more here than they fit with like jokey jean shorts wearing like newfound glory type.
Right.
Like they definitely have like fit more in this world, but like like some of these bands are screamo, some are pop punk, some are post hardcore, but it just all became emo revival. And that's fine, we can just call it what it became called by every
Right.
like. But so but the word revival, like these are the new bands, now they're the old bands, and so it's like it's surreal because it's just,
Yeah.
time.
Now there's
Yeah.
like there's like fifth wave and sixth wave now, and I have no idea how to follow it. And it makes me feel very old.
Yeah, it seems to move faster than ever, but I mean, there's like, so many good bands out now, and like you said before, like these bands are taking those bands out, and but also, I mean, just to sidebar for a second, like I recently went to see Origami Angel, and
Hmm.
like they I think sold out like a 700-person venue, and like it reminded me of like the first time I saw like modern baseball do a sellout show, because I
Right.
was like, whoa, this is what's happening now. Like it was um I was like, the new generation is like fully here, like they're kicking, they're like bringing out hundreds of kids, and these kids are like, these are my bands, like
Right.
and so I'm so glad that it's happening all over again, and I just feel like it's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
But let's talk about some records. So what was
Let's.
like, yeah, what was maybe, I don't know, one of your big favorites from that list?
So I mean, I think anyone who follows me on Twitter or have known me knows like Touche Amore is one of my favorite bands of all time. And this around this time is when I moved to LA, and obviously, I know everyone knows Jeremy lives in that area. And one day I went to Burbank to go to this record store, Backside Records, and he was there. So like I like sheepishly like introduced myself, like, hey, my name's Drew. Like I didn't want to like punish him. I was like, hey, I just I'm a big fan of your music. It means a lot to me. And that's all I thought. But he like Jeremy being the nice guy he is, like we started talking and like I told him like what I did. He's like, oh yeah, I heard that site. You guys wrote about us, blah blah blah. And then we developed a friendship from that. Like when they went on their tour, like on the weekends I'd like be the vinyl buyer there. So like we got to develop a friendship. And the Is Survived by record release party was at Backside Records, and it was cool to be there with the band and a bunch of fans who came to buy the record. But to get to the music, like I had like that personal, like lovingly connection to it. But like if it wasn't a good record, it'd just be like a nice like side story. But like the way they jumped from Parting the Sea, which is one of my favorite records, to expanding their songwriting like they did on Is Survived by, it was like it really like knocked me on my ass. Like like Harbor and DNA, or like Harbor is an insane song. Like now, like since they've become even better songwriters and musicians, and you've heard it on Stage Four and Lament, but like at the time when they put out Harbor, that was like a really big like holy shit moment for Touche Amore, with like again like the kind of like the shoegazy undertones and stuff to it, and hearing the band like write 3 and 4 minute songs, which kind of, and we kind of talked about it in like the Brooklyn Vegan article about their split of pianos with Gravity metaphorically. That kind of like set the tone for this record, obviously, because that was like a big musical jump for them too, and for them to be able to capitalize on it and release a record that Jeremy struggled writing the lyrics, like he to write Content, like um, we joked like later, like it was kind of ironic that on this record he wrote to write Content, like he was so happy with writing it, and then what followed up obviously is like the complete 180 from that. But I don't know, that's record sticks out the most to me from that era is Survived By, and then also the Wonder Years record, The Greatest Generation, just for absolutepunk.net purposes. Like I think I think we premiered the first song off that record, which being my memory is washed, I can't remember the song, but it was in like that. Really, all the credit goes to like Thomas Nassif. He developed a really good relationship with Hopeless and the band, and be able to work um, through Absolute Punk with One of Yours, developed like my friendship with Dan and the band. And that was, do you remember they did the 4 shows in 24 hours around that record release? And so I was at the show at Chain Reaction, the fourth show after them traveling cross country. And so that always sticks out to me. That again was a huge stylistic jump from Suburbia too. That you know, there's not a whole lot of pop punk on that record, and it gets more into like like kind of like an alternative rock song. I don't know. I can't ever categorize what these sounds are, but like it's probably because I'm just such a shitty writer that I can't describe it. But it was
That
such
is
like a
not
great
true.
that was a big record. And then like the third one for me is Albatross by Foxy. Like
Of
that
course.
record means a lot to me, and we kind of went to bat with that for that record on Absolute Punk because we worked with Count with Your Lucky Stars to premiere that whole record before really anyone knew who they were, and like that was like the launching off point. And like when I talked to Connor a few years ago, right before Draw Down the Moon came out, he's like, "Yeah, that like, we remember that like premiering that record. Like, who's this band, Foxing?" Like, and it was like that is definitely kind of like almost like an emo revivalist record, I would say, more so than a lot of the records on this list. But I adore that record. It's a very, I think I saw like Ian and Miranda Reinhardt tweeting about like that's a very 2013 record for sure. That's very a record of its time, where I don't know how well it ages 10 years later, not in like a negative or like canceled way, but more as like what they've progressed to as a band and what they've put out since then. I would think the band would probably agree with that statement too, that it's just very much of that time. It was a great record. It's a great record of that era. But it's definitely like my least favorite of the Foxing records. But when I think 2013, I think of Albatross a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting because Albatross is also my least favorite Foxing record. But if you go to a Foxing show, it is very clearly the favorite of most people in the room. And I
Right.
like feel bad for Foxing because I think, like you said, like I think the band would agree they've gotten so much better. And like I would say, like I would kind of go as far as to say that Near My God might just be like my favorite record from this whole scene. Like it's like exactly the type of music that makes me the most excited,
Hmm.
where it's like still rooted in like heavy like post-hardcore, and like you tell they come from that world, but they're like making like this Radiohead type record, like with
Right.
that energy of like Connor still screams on that record, and like the drums are still like a band who play punk shows. Because like a lot of the more experimental art rock type stuff will lose the energy, and so like I love when bands like do a record like this. It's just like my kind of ideal. So like I don't think like you can get much higher than Year My God. And listening to
Right.
Albatross after hearing Year My God, and of course the other two records, which are fantastic, it just it sounds like a band who's like not quite there yet, and like having heard what they've done. But it is also this classic to so many people, so I feel like it lives in this weird like it's in these, it's like depending on who you are, that's either like the record or that's like the Pablo Honey, like
Yeah,
yeah.
right. I think 2013 was definitely like the moment for like labels like Tiny Engines and Run for Cover to like kind of
Hmm.
establish themselves as like the labels. Top Shelf too, but Top Shelf, I love how they've kind of like not pivoted, and they've always been like this, but like their roster now is so diverse. You can't really call them like a post hardcore emo record because they put out stuff from everything. But like like Top Shelf put out, The World Is Whenever If Ever is again, it's like a super iconic record. Um, and I know they're touring on it. I read some comments on the forum where people are kind of like weirded out by that because I don't think there's really any OG members of the band as much anymore who wrote that. Maybe,
There's
maybe,
still, there's a good amount.
maybe
It's
I think I think David joined to sing on it after it was like they like the primary songwriters I guess aren't in the band anymore. I think I'd have to look at the liner notes,
mhm.
but again, I that doesn't bother me because it's like that's still their record, and I'm going to be stoked to see them play it live, and that record means a lot to a lot of people too, and you know that was like the Run for Cover had Turnover and Citizen, which two bands that have taken completely different trajectories sonically from those first records too. Where like Turnover is kind of like a disco band now almost based off that
Yeah,
last record. And but I mean, they did follow up Magnolia with Peripheral Vision, which is everyone's favorite Turnover record.
yeah,
Um, and Citizen, like I can't even remember the last time I listened to Youth because I just love their newer stuff so much. Like the direction they took in, like everyone goes to heaven was like such like a left turn, and I love it when bands take left turns.
mhm,
Um, but it just kind of like it's like looking at this list and you're just like, oh yeah, they used to like have more of like that kind of lean, like pop punk lean, or like a more upbeat lean, or more of a guitar driven kind of lean to it than what they've aspired to 10 years later. And of course, like Tiny Engines ran into all their drama and the deserved shuttering of their label. If you're not paying your artists, you shouldn't be a label. But I mean, Little Big League, like I mean, everyone now knows like Michelle is Japanese Breakfast and #1 best-selling author in the world. But
mhm.
like that's such a fun record to listen to now, especially in retrospect with what Japanese Breakfast has become. And it's a really good record too. And I did admire Tiny Engines for taking so many chances on like bands that probably wouldn't get a label deal a lot of times. And it's sad what it eventually turned into. But yeah, that State Falls record, like, do you get Oso after that? If that record never comes out, like, there's just so many threads you could pull from it. Like, it's crazy to think, like, yeah, State Falls, Little Big League, two Tiny Engines bands have led to Oso, which is like one of the best, like, kind of like power pop punk emo type artists too. And then I mean, obviously, Japanese Breakfast is ginormous. She's on fucking Saturday Night Live and everything, and writing music with Jack Antonoff now.
Yeah,
It's just like if you think about it, like it blows my brain like how yeah Michelle Zauner was in a band that was on a label that doesn't exist anymore. Like
yeah. I mean, I saw, Little Big League play a very, very tiny room, like, second of 4, I think, and, like, I think the rest of the bill was, like, Sirs, which was that emo band on Top Shelf whose members are now in Sheer Mag, and Spook Houses, whose members became Level Up. Um, and Little Big League just opened for those 2 bands, and it was just like you could tell, like, in that moment, like, the room was probably half full, and if it was full, I think it only would have held, like, 100 people, and you were just like, "Yeah, that band was really good." And then, like, like, I think a year later, they put out, this record that's on this list, and it was like, "Whoa, they're, like, really good." And then, of course, Japanese Breakfast happens. But, yeah, I mean, listening back to this one was a trip because it was like, "Oh, yeah, Michelle had this the whole time." Like, not that like you didn't know it, but when you see what something can become and you go, you're like, whoa, like she still had that amazing voice, like, and the songs are there. And it's just this time it's over like noodly emo guitars instead of like, big synths and stuff.
yeah, I think what really like looking back on this list in this era of this style of music is like all these bands have like really fucking good musicians. Like like I feel like prior eras, like if like they go back like to like the pop punk well, or even like prior alternative rock or emo, like they weren't always the best musicians. They just got off, on like the emotion and the kind of like the lyrics they probably put out. But like these are like dead ass like some of the best musicians just decided like they're right. This is the type of music they want to write and create. But I mean, like that Crasher Rhinos is like I remember being blown away by like just how like sonically tight they sounded. Like I don't know, it's crazy. And then you think, yeah, Michelle's Honor and Oso Oso and like Japanese Breakfast emerged from this, and like listening back 10 years, you're like you can hear like the seeds being planted for what the bands would become on later records. Like it's just a testament to like the talent on this list of just like how fucking good they were at constructing songs.
That's kind of also what I mean about the fact that these bands were like, playing so many shows. Like they were really developing this level of musicianship and like chemistry. Like cuz again, like I think when you look at the fact that this is the era where this scene kind of started getting attention from people who maybe weren't going to see emo shows or punk shows, I think one of the big things was like if you went to these shows, you were going to see a great band.
Mhm.
Like, and that wasn't always the case. Like, there are bands that were way hotter that like can't really play. And then you go
Right,
see these bands and you're like, oh, they can like they're so tight, they're so loud, like people are moving around because what else would you be doing with this kind of energy in the room?
right,
And that was what made these shows so special, I think, is like there was a real lack in like the kind of indie world of shows that were going to go off like this. And these shows all went off. Like every band on this list, like, I mean, you've said so many things. In my head, I've been responding to each one. So it's like, but take
yeah.
like the Wonder Years. Like, I remember the first time I saw the Wonder Years. It was on the Greatest Generation, and I was just like absolutely blown away by the energy on stage and off. Like, because they were already like big by this record. Like,
Mhm.
that's the other thing
Yeah,
too, is like it's fascinating that like the three you brought up, like Touche, Wonder Years, and Foxing. Like Foxing were playing for like 50 people on the Albatross. Wonder Years was like a big band on Greatest
mhm.
Generation. And I went and it was my first time seeing them. And like the room was full of people who knew every word to every single song they played, who had like come to just like blow off whatever amount of steam was in them, but in like a very like no one's getting hurt kind of way.
Right,
Um and then the band was just like unrealistically professional on stage, but not in like a corporate sellout rock band.
right,
Like it was
yeah,
just like they have three guitar players, everybody rips, everybody's completely tight. And because I feel like the one thing I've always loved about the Wonder Years is like, and they've talked about this in a million interviews, but like their insistence on not using auto tune and drum quantizing. So
right,
they like were able to make these records that sounded like those polished pop punk records that we all love without any of the tricks that those bands had used to make it sound
right,
that perfect. So they just had to get that good.
right.
And that's why when you see the Wonder Years live, you're not like, "Oh yeah, the record's a little better." It's like, no, they pull off everything they do on the record live. Like
Yep,
it's the same version of the band in both
exactly.
places. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, out of the three I initially mentioned, they were the biggest of those three, and like, yeah, Suburbia grabbed a huge following. But yeah, and you probably do agree with this, but like, Greatest Generation was like the album where like outside of like the absolute punk world, we're like, oh, we're gonna take this band seriously now, So,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
I
the
mean,
shows, yeah,
yeah, like I am a very, very big Wonder Years fan. I think, if there's anybody who either follows me on Twitter or reads my writing, it's clear that I'm kind of a stan for this band. So I feel like I can like admit it safely. But like when I first heard the Wonder Years, which was either Upsides or Suburbia, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't really know if I'm in the market for a new pop punk band.
hmm,
Like because I was like already at the point of my life where I was kind of like, I'm not gonna listen to Newfound Glory anymore.
right,
Like,
right,
and so then there was like this band who kind of sounds like them, and it was like, so like, so I was just kind of like, I don't know if it's really for me. And then Greatest Generation came out, and like some friend was like, you gotta hear it. And so like I put it on and it's like, there, track one. And I'm like, okay, this is like pretty fucking good. And then
yeah,
like, passing through the screen door comes on and you're like, God damn. Like, it was just like it was like they convinced me to like pop punk again. They were just like, I'm gonna
right,
make a pop punk record so good that like anything you think about this genre that's negative, you're just gonna have to throw it out the window because we're gonna be that good at it. And it's like, to me, like, they, like, it's what you said before, like, these are great musicians who just chose this music. Like the Wonder Years chose pop punk. Like, obviously they're fans of Newfound Glory, Blink 182, Starting Line. Like, um, that's what they like. But these are just some of the greatest songwriters of the past 15 years, some of the tightest musicians, like, and they just want to play pop punk instead of something that would be more immediately accepted as, cool.
Yeah,
And this record, I think, is really the moment where they were like, you don't have to take us seriously, but we're going to be so good that, like, you'd be pretty dumb not to.
yeah, and yeah, it's crazy. I think, and then like I think we got definitely talk about like balancing composure because that was definitely
Hmm.
another really big one from that time, especially considering the pivot they made musically on their last record when they were on Vagrant. But I remember we had the Absolute Punk.net podcast back then, and we were interviewing the guys from the bands. And I felt like such an idiot because we were talking about Notice Me with the screaming at the end. And I like dead ass to the John. I was like, yeah, so did you get like Ned or from Title Fight or Jeremy to like do it? Because I didn't have like the liner notes. He's like, no, that's me screaming. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm such an idiot. Because he never like really screamed like that too much on Separation or like even like Only
Hmm.
Boundaries. But like that record is amazing. Like I know a lot of people who didn't care for the prior Balance records. That record hit and they're like, this is my favorite band. Like it's such a good record. And I remember you've probably have interacted with Jamie Coletta. She was just like
Sure.
she was a huge stan like because she lives in LA and we hung out a lot back then. And she was just like a huge fan of that record. Like we listened to it all the time. And um, I think I don't think that's a band that's ever going to come back. Honestly, I think I think John likes his Creeks project, and I think after that record, obviously they were burnt out on that style of music, which is okay. Bands have it, like they want to try new things. That's what Light We Made was like. It was a complete left turn, and it's a great record.
Hmm.
Um, but I think and this is just me like just putting on my music critic or writer hat and conjecture where it's like I just think maybe they thought they couldn't be balanced and composure and make that kind of music and like continue to be like a band and tour and keep that fan base. Like they wanted to branch into something more, which is why I think the band ended and like John seems to be thriving with his Creeks project. And I haven't really kept up with what the other members in the band are up to, if they're in other bands or different projects or just have completely separated from the music side of things. But what a record to kind of go out on, like as like your last like big like emo or post hardcore record.
Yeah. I mean, it does just seem like, like when I went back to it, because I hadn't heard it in years, it was like, oh yeah, like you did this, you took this as far as you could take it. Like, of course you had to pivot from here because, like, how could you do this again and top the things we think we're missing? One of the things that really stuck out to me going back to all these records was just the way that, like, almost every band in this world was just like really in this constant state of evolution. Like, um, it just like, and it's wild to look back to because, like, when like with time and you look back and you're like, wait, like 2013 was just 1 year after, Floral Green, and you can already hear like the influence of that record, like, and it didn't like seem as quick in real, like, I feel like when it was really happening, it was kind of like, oh, I'm starting to see like people seem influenced by Title Fight. And then just in hindsight, I'm like, it's weird to think that it only took like 4 months to see bands that were, but it's like, it was a lot of like, it was really one of those eras where like each year was so different. Like you saw Title Fight put out Floral Green and it had a little shoegaze on it. And like you mentioned Run for Cover before, like 5 of the records on this list are on Run for Cover. And Run for Cover, I think, was really quick to realize about the shoegaze thing. And they had, Pity, Sex, and Cloakroom, who were fully that. They were like almost the opposite. They were like shoegaze bands with a little bit of emo. But then I don't know, you just see like yeah, we talked about that Touche piano split. Like in 2011, Pianos and Touche are two of the best sort of like post-hardcore kind of screamo-y bands doing it. And then 2 years later, they put out a split where they're both like, hey, we're gonna be more than that. And then they put out their follow-up records to that split, which both go in different directions. And you just like there's just so like or Turnover is a perfect example of a band that just like every album is so different, but then when you listen in a row, you're like, oh, I kind of each one hints at the next a bit. Like Turnover is like first EP is like straight pop punk. And then Magnolia is not really that pop punk. Like I remember Magnolia as being like their pop punk record, and then I go back and I'm like, oh, it's like not that different from Peripheral Vision. Like I thought it was so different at the time. But it's like you're seeing the seeds, and like if you compare Magnolia to the last Turnover record, it's like, how is that the same band? But if you listen to each one, it's like really gradual build. Um, and it's just like this whole like kind of group of bands, they just felt like they were pushing each other and like getting like exponentially better on each record and like discovering new influences on each record and like really just building these catalogs that are like really these like capital C catalogs. It's not they're not just like, oh yeah, like if you like our fourth record, you'll probably like our 13th. It's all the same vibe. It's like they're really just making like writing these stories like that start at point A and just go and never look back. And yeah.
Yeah, it's and, like there's even like records on like going back on the Brooklyn Vegan list, like that the Pup record, that first Pup record. I remember Jamie sending it to me, and I didn't listen to it for like 3 weeks because I was so turned off by the album art. And I've told the band this before with like the teeth, and like it's an
Mhm.
actual drawing, which is pretty sick. But like even though like Floral Green and Shed came out on Side One Dummy, like Side One Dummy to me still kind of had like that stigma of being like, I wear a bowling shirt, old man punk pop, like Social
Mhm.
D kind of like, and
Yeah,
like it's not
yeah.
like kind of like my style, and like Gaslight Land, like Greaser kind of music, and like so I was just like, I don't know. This seems like it's gonna be like a Sublime record or something. I don't know why I put like that correlation with it, but like I guess I just didn't have much to listen to one night. And I put it on, and it was like I was so wrong about this. It's like this record just like absolutely rips, and like it's crazy. I think that record's 10 years because they've kind of put out records at a pretty prolific rate. I think like there's not a lot of time off for Pup, and they did that show in Long Beach with Joyce Manor just recently, where they played in front of like 14,000 people were there. Like that's probably a show that could only happen in Long Beach with Joyce Manor because it's their hometown. But like the fact that not every hometown band can sell out a 14,000 seat arena. Um, and then I really appreciate seeing the Comadre record on there because
Hell yeah.
there is a generation of music fan that just thinks of Jack Shirley as like this incredible producer, and
Mhm.
like they just associate him with like a sunbather and everything since then. But it's like, no, Comadre fucking ripped, and I was so sad I didn't get to catch one of those last kind of West Coast shows when I was out there. Just never, it wasn't written in the stars, but that record is so good, and it's such a oft forgotten record when we talk about this genre of music. So I was like super thrilled to see it on the list because
That's awesome to hear
yeah,
because like
yeah,
that is one of my favorite records from
yeah,
this
it's so
era.
good.
And I'm like, yeah, I don't know why it never got like the proper treatment. Like, it's probably because they broke up and it came out in January. So it was like,
Hmm.
like that January 2013 was a lot different than December 2013 for the way these bands were getting received. And they weren't there to tour. So, there was no real need to follow up on them, I guess. But that is like, also, like, Comadre never made another record like that because like they had been
Right.
this screamo band. Then that record, like, I used to call it like it sounds like screamo neutral milk hotel. Like it's got like horns and organs, it's just like
Yeah.
it's like this like whimsical like like sort of chamber pop record, but with screamo vocals. And I've never heard another record in my life that sounds like Comadre self-titled. And I just feel like it should be like a written in stone classic that everyone should love and talk more about. And I don't know. I hope they do a reunion tour. Maybe it'll be like a Jawbreaker thing where like 25 years later, people are like, "Dear You is amazing," like. But
Yeah, I would say a lot of the bands on that list, their favorite band is probably Comadre. Like it's like
yeah, like
they're such a band's band. Like
yeah, like when Restoration shared our list and they were like, "It's really like stoked to be on this," and also shout out to Comadre. And
yeah,
I had also like put Comadre on the Brooklyn Vegan list of the best punk and emo records of the 2010s, which came out in like December 2019. And when we did that, like I remember, like I think Chris Teddy from The World Is was like, "You're not gonna find another list with Comadre on it." Like there's
Right.
always like band members who are like, if you're, we know like that how good that band is, but people aren't going to talk about it. So yeah, I agree. Like a band's band for sure, especially with the Jack Shirley connection too, because it's like how many people on this list have worked at some point with Jack Shirley? Probably like half of
Right.
them.
Yeah, and the restorations mention is crazy too because I feel like there's a lot of fans of this style of music that has never listened to a restorations record and they don't understand like how great they are. And I am really stoked to see that they're kind of like, they're going to play some shows and they might have some new songs to play. And I really hope they have a new record coming out because I celebrate all their records. I think they're super good. And this is another Side One Dummy. Like Side One Dummy also had a moment this year, and like during this type of era, and I give a lot of credit to. I've written about it before when during this time, like to Jamie, and it's just like so sad how the rug got pulled out from all the people who worked at Side One and what it became. Because like, um, is this why Jamie's so successful with her no earbud stuff? Like she always has her finger on the pulse, and like you could see it in this 2012, 2013, 2014 kind of releases on Side One because Title Fight, you had Pup, you had Restorations, Jeff Rosenstock got signed to that, and it's just like crazy, like what happened to that label, like how some like it's like completely opposite spectrums of like why Tiny Inches doesn't exist and like why
Hmm.
that iteration of Side One Dummy doesn't exist anymore. And they have like their fingerprints are like all over this era too, and it's like there's it's just like gone, and it's crazy.
Yeah, no, Jamie definitely personally sold me on a handful of bands, and I think she
Yeah,
probably was the first person to like show me restorations. And she did a really good job at I like don't remember exactly, but she was like, "Oh yeah, like I think you really like this band. They sound like, X meets Y meets Z." And I was like, "That sounds fascinating." And like play and like I was like, "You know what? I completely hear what that comparison." And
yeah, she's one of the smartest people I know. She's
yeah,
awesome. Like,
she's no, for sure. Like shout out Jamie Coletta for sure. I mean, like just such a huge music fan. Like you can just sense the true love that goes into everything she does on top of just being like an absolute pleasure to work with and like so friendly and awesome and just like I can't say enough nice things about Jamie. Um to go back to another record you brought up, Citizen Youth. You mentioned how Albatross was so of this era. I feel the same about Youth. Like and I agree with you on like I like what Citizen has done since like yeah, everybody's going to heaven. Such a cool record because like that was in 2015 where like you know, the shoegaze thing was really getting big in this world. And I was just like, if you were to ask me in 2014 what Citizen is going to do next, I'd be like, oh, make a shoegaze record. That was just like what if I was like trying to tell the future, I'd be like, Citizen for sure is going to like, Turnover is going to do Peripheral Vision and Citizen's going to make their shoegaze record. And they were like, no, we're going to make like a Jesus Lizard record. Like
yeah,
nobody was doing anything like that. And it was so dope. And then I really really like Life in Your Glass World, which I think is my favorite of theirs at this point.
yeah, that's their
And
best
it's like
record for sure.
yeah, and it's wild to see this band who are 10 years or more than 10 years in, and also for like a lot of people similar to Foxing, like I think there are some Citizen fans who kind of think their moment's past, but I think there's like more and more people like are coming out of the woodwork and being like, "Life in Your Glass World is the best Citizen record." And I mean, last year they just spent the whole year on the road. Like I saw them with Turnstile, and then also with I think Joyce Manor, and it was just like they definitely like they're pushing hard right now, and I think it's working because they deserve it. But yeah, Youth is like to be honest, like I wasn't that big into Youth when it came out. Like I felt a little bit like too old for it. Maybe I don't know. Like I was just no pun intended. Like it feels like very youthful. Like it's a
Yeah,
real like this is like I don't know. I felt like this was like the new generation's like your favorite weapon or something. Like I was kind of like I had mine.
yeah.
Like but listening back, I'm like you know what? Like, I'm never going to be the person who's like, I remember screaming the words to this when I was 15, but I totally hear it. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is a classic. I really appreciate it. It's held up really well for a record that I do think is geared towards like an audience who's coming of age. I think it holds up really well, regardless of the age you listen to it at.
Yeah, the album art definitely has like that Tumblr aesthetic to it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Even if the music doesn't necessarily match it. And I think, I mean, it could be misremembering, but like I believe like Magnolia came out in April that year, and Youth was either like late May or early June. So it's like incredible to think like Run for Cover is like releasing those two records within like a 60-day span.
Yeah.
Like those like the type of records labels like build their
And
entire
that
year.
Will Yip is working on all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that.
This is like the era of like Will Yip coming like being like a household name too as well.
Right.
But like those are like records that like labels like build their entire like year around, and like Run for Cover is just like dropping heat like every like 30 or 60 days. A lot of these labels were just like there's this like a new banger of a record like every month or so coming from these labels. It's just
Yeah,
like
no, it was
insane.
nuts. It was a banner year for Run for Cover, banner year for Will Yip. Like, yeah, I mean, Top Shelf, Side One, like it was, yeah, everybody was just firing on all cylinders, like labels, bands, producers, like ridiculous. Um, a record I want to talk about is Survived By. You talked a lot about
Yeah.
it. I want to share my Is Survived By story.
Yes, please.
So um first of all, I want to say this is my favorite Touche record. And I think the band doesn't like it that much, is what I it seems. They don't play the songs live that much. I mean, they're playing the whole album full soon. I'm not sure exactly if this podcast goes up before or after that happens. But February they're playing their second through fifth albums in full, and you'll probably be there.
I wish. I wish.
Okay.
If I didn't
But
have a toddler, I definitely would
oh,
be
right,
flying
right,
out to
yeah.
Los Angeles for that.
Um, but yeah, like I know Jeremy has talked about like not loving the lyrics he wrote on this record in hindsight, and they don't play too many of these songs live. But like, Parting the Sea is a great record, one of my favorite albums probably ever. And I remember when I heard Just Exist come out as a single, I was literally like, are they fucking kidding?
Mhm.
Like, it was just like I didn't like already thought they were a great band, but I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was like, the production, which so Brad Wood did this record, who people of this genre probably know best from Sunny Day Real Estate's Diary and Me Without You's Catch for Us the Foxes and Brother Sister. Although he's also done like Liz Phair, Smashing Pumpkins and stuff. But Touche has said they worked with him because of the Me Without You records,
Mhm.
and he got them this beautiful sound. Like, I mean, there were still records on this list that listening back, I was like, oh yeah, this is like that lo-fi DIY emo revival production. Touche had this like gorgeous, like big rock record production. Um, the guitars are like melodic and
Mhm.
beautiful. The drum intro of Just Exist, just like every time you hear it, it just like hits for me at least. Like just I feel like I feel it in my bones, like to use a cliche, but um, and then it's just like Jeremy comes in and it's like his vocals are still like harshly screamed the entire time. He's not doing any clean singing yet, but it's like so clear compared to what he had done previously. Like it's just every word is like a nun's like I forget sometimes that he screams on that whole record because it's just so like clear and like he has a voice like nobody else.
Right.
And I think on that record more than any other one before it, it became really, really clear that he had like transcended all of his influences and had just become like, one of the hardcore vocalists of like a generation. Um, so I like heard that album, that song, and I was just like, I'm so desperate to hear the rest of this record. But when you like hear a single and then your expectations are like immediately just too high, like especially if you've listened to the single like on repeat, because then it's like you're going into the record and one song you know every word to, and the rest you've never heard. So I like finally get the record, put it on, Just Exist track one, and it just never falls. It's just like on that level. And I called up a friend. I was like, you have to come over and I have to play you the new Touche Amore record. Like he's like, yeah, no, like they're cool. I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. Like, and
Right.
he came over and like sat down and like we just listened to the whole record in silence and didn't talk until it ended. And was just like, yeah, that is one of the best things I've ever heard in my life. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. I think it's also probably my favorite Touche Amore record.
mhm.
Probably yeah, with all the direct memories I have with it. But yeah, it was a nice sonic change from the last record, and like Social Caterpillar and Blue Angels are like two of my favorite songs that they've ever written. Like the first half of the record is really good, but like after Harbor hits and then the way the second half of that record goes, it's like some of the band's like best songwriting, and they've only improved on it with the later records. But I would definitely be interested in hearing. Jeremy's opinion on the record now, like 10 years later too. Because I know you mentioned I don't know how long ago those comments were, especially with just like what happened in his life after that record came out, and it's kind of like probably some painful memories he's had with that and everything too. With it with his mother passing and everything. But I would be really curious to hear his more a more recent assessment of it because I for a while like Stage Four was like my favorite Touche record because that was even more like a sonic leap and just like the heaviness, lyrically on it like really hit for me too. But then like I went through a Touche kind of like discography run recently, like one does, I guess, and I was like, no, "Is Survived By" is the Touche record for me. I think the last two records, just like from like an objective perspective, is probably better songwriting and better musicianship, and they've grown so much as artists. But yeah, I think "Is Survived By" will always be my favorite Touche Amore record, and what it meant to me during that time too.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they have like objectively improved, but I can't separate like that record is what turned me into like a super fan. To answer your question, so in 2020, Jeremy ranked all of
Oh,
Touche's
that's right.
records
Yeah.
right for Dan Ozzie on his Substack, and he put his Survive By at the bottom. He said, I'll be honest, when Pitchfork put up that review and we got an 8.0, I was genuinely shocked by it. Um, I'm trying to there are a few issues with the record for me personally. I had to re-record all the vocals. Um, you should read it. I'm not going to read the whole thing
Yeah,
on this
yeah, I
podcast,
do remember. I
but
now that
yeah,
you mention, I do remember that. And I guess when all your records are bangers, one record is going to be in the bottom spot. But
yeah. And I think like the perspective is always different when it's your record.
right.
Like I don't know. I mean, when I spoke to Ned recently about Floral Green, like I love that song Sympathy on that record. And he kind of sings about like, like, oh, I just wanted to be something. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I was so concerned with having a legacy. Now I think that is the stupidest thing to be concerned with. So it's like he'll be like that song, like he actually said that Floral Green is his favorite Title Fight record, but like he'll be like the sentiment expressed in that song no longer resonates with me. So, but that's just such a different stance than when you're the listener and you just get brought back to like what that song did for you. So I
It's
think just because a band ranks a certain record somewhere
right.
doesn't mean the fans are always going to agree.
That's crazy. That's kind of funny to bring up like the legacy thing because that's like literally like what the final track of "Is Survived By" is kind of
Yeah,
about.
yeah. They're both like it's funny how they're kind of these like-minded records that were probably like written around the same time. I mean, I doubt. I'm sure like "Is Survived By" had been getting written already. But yeah, it's. I mean, I guess and I think I'm not sure, but I feel like Jeremy has also expressed like that is not a sentiment I currently think about the way it was then. And I get that. I get growing out of that feeling, and maybe you know it's like an old picture. You're like, ooh, I didn't like the way I looked back
Yeah.
then. Like
Life happens, man. Like
yeah.
especially like I think I love the album art. I love how
Oh, it's so good.
the five of them are mimicking the skyline, and it's just the whole like color palette of it's really cool. But I mean, when you have Nick, who's like basically like what the creative director of like Capitol Records or something now,
Something like
like
that.
it's like their art's always on point, and I think that also kind of like separates Touche from a lot of these bands for me as like my favorite is like I have all the deluxe editions of their records, like with all the expanded artwork and the hardcover, and it's just like I don't know. It's really nerdy, but like it just like adds a little extra to that music for me to have like that tactical feeling to it, and
Yeah,
like knowing like how much they care about the music, but also like the presentation and the visuals and the art with it, like the complete package. They're like a complete package band for me. Like they hit like every check mark.
for sure. I love that Nick did that art and also the Sunbather art the same year because they've kind of got these like similar aesthetics, but like one's blue, one's pink. They go really well together,
Hmm.
like, and I also think those records in general go really well together. Um, like Sunbather is not on this list because I genre is weird and debatable, but I felt like Sunbather doesn't really count, but, like, arguably could have been and was coming from a similar place, and, like, Def Heaven and Touche, like, did recently tour together and were both on Death Wish at the time, but, like, Def Heaven were definitely pulling from screamo, and, I feel like, because they came out around the same time and were same label, same artist, album cover artist, um I used to kinda describe, like, Is Survived By as, like, fast Sunbather, because it's like they kinda have, like,
Yeah,
all the same intricate guitar work, but just over, like, fast drum beats, and, like, Deaf Heaven are just, like, 8-minute songs that are but, like, yeah, they both have these really, like, beautiful, like, kinda lush, like, guitar quilts and then, like, scream vocals, and so
yeah. Death
yeah.
Heaven, I'm excited for that 10-year discourse. I saw the playoff
Oh, yeah.
Sunday there in at the Echo in Los Angeles in 2013. And then the next time I saw them, they were direct support for Baroness. So they've definitely had like the crazy trajectory too. I think the discourse around Sunbather 10 years ago was painful, and I think it'll be painful again this year with how black metal fans are. Um,
I'm really curious because I mean, it's like, at this point, it's kinda like it would feel so tired to rehash those same conversations,
it's
but
gonna happen,
they're gonna get rehashed, yeah.
especially with like,
Um,
and they'll be the other end of it now too, with like how their last record was like a completely like sonic departure from that too. So
mhm.
then you have the people be like, "Oh, I wish they were like Sunbather," and then you have the people like, "Well, they're not black metal. This is not a black metal record." I think the two discourses of anniversaries I'm looking forward to the most this year is Sunbather, and then this is also the 20th year anniversary of Metallica's Saint Anger. And
Ah.
I love talking about that record. That is a top four Metallica record for me. I don't care if anyone thinks that's stupid because I fucking love that record
Wow.
so much.
Hot takes on this
Oh
podcast.
yeah, man. Like I can't. I hope there's a cultural reckoning or rewriting of its history this summer. There's got to be at least, Stereo Gump's definitely gonna put a 20-year piece on that record.
I mean,
They got to.
even if you gotta talk about it, like, it's because it's so fun to talk about, even if you hate it. I mean, I don't hate Saint Anger, but I don't really like it either. But I will say, like, since you brought it up, I will say that, it's I like it more than what they're doing on their last few records, because now they're just kinda, like, trying to write '80s thrash records again, and
Right.
I like that they were, like, trying to be different and, like, failing miserably, I think. Maybe you don't agree, but, like, I just like that they were like, "Alright, we're gonna make this record that's not like anything we've done before,"
Right.
and now they're just kinda like, "Let's just sound like we always sounded
Well,
back in the day," and so I'd rather see you, like,
yes.
leap and then land on your face than just, like, tread water and be like, "Oh, well, just, like, keep making the same thing," you know?
Objectively, there are many terrible moments on that record, but it's because
Yes.
I love it because it's unhinged Metallica. Like James Hetfield's like yelping and everything throughout it. Like his vocals are different than what they ever been. I the drums do not bother me as much as they bother other
I
people.
don't mind the drums
I
at
get what
all,
they were getting.
honestly.
I think I'm excited to see some discourse around the documentary with it with some kind of monster. Um, I like it so much because yeah, obviously the first like there you have the first five Metallica records are all iconic records,
Mhm.
but like then like Load and Reload fucking suck. So that's like the worst of Metallica, and they're like putting out like 100-minute long records that are just like slow and boring, and I hated that era. And then I think that's why I like Saint Anger so much because it's just like this is so refreshing from what the last like 10 years of Metallica music was.
Mhm.
And whether some of it's bad, yeah, like you said, I like it when bands take risks. And then unfortunately, I think the backlash to it was just so bad that they're like, well, let's just put out Death Magnetic. That just sounds like
Right.
watered down Justice for All or something. Like, it's just like
Yeah.
but I will. That'll be the first record I listen to on April 19th. Is the 72 seasons, or whatever the new record's called,
Mm.
with the terrible album art. Saint Anger has great album art too. That it's iconic.
No, it actually does, and it's like it makes me nostalgic, like, because it's like I don't know, I didn't, because so, like, I'm 31, like, Saint Anger is the first song I ever heard by Metallica, the title
Okay,
track.
yeah.
Like, I didn't have the context to be like, "No, no, like, Ride the Lightning's a classic, fuck this," like, so I was just, like, saw it on MTV, and it was like, they played it probably right in between, like, Korn and Linkin Park or something, and it fit in, like, they kinda had achieved what they were trying to do, like, they wanted to fit in with new bands and, like, be able to seem relevant, which a lot of those legendary '80s thrash bands never did. I mean, they just like a lot if you look at the records that, like, their peers were putting out in 2003, they were not on television, and they couldn't have been because they sounded like '80s records for the most part. So, like, but that was my introduction, and I didn't, like, have the context. When I gained the context, I was kinda like, "Oh, like, so Metallica were amazing?"
Yeah.
Like, and then I kinda was like, "Yeah, I understand when people hate Saint Anger." But, like, it brings me back because I remember, like, going to, like, FYE and seeing that CD on display and, like,
Yeah,
watching the video on MTV and, like, I don't know, I have, like,
yeah.
some
It's
yeah.
it's my 5th favorite. It's I like it more than the Black Album.
Wow,
Black
okay.
Album has some bangers. That's like that following up for Justice for All is like that was kinda like the beginning of, like, Metallica giving into all their worst impulses, even though that really shows itself more on, like, Load and Reload. But,
Mhm.
objectively, Black Album is a better album than Saint Anger, so no one, like, gets really mad at me, but I like Saint Anger way more than the Black Album.
Sure. I definitely don't have the attention span to listen to Load and Reload start to finish, but I do have to say I like The Memory Remains. I think it's a good song.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely gonna be, like, a couple good songs for sure. There's
Right,
always
yeah.
but I don't those records do nothing for me. I love Saint Anger. I'm probably gonna be way off base. I'm sure it'll just probably be articles about how it's still, like, a terrible record. But I have some hope. Like, there was, like, this past year, there was, like, or last over a couple years, there's been, like, a new appreciation for, like, Korn records. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping the same thing happens for Saint Anger.
Yeah, no, I mean, Korn records are great, so and yeah, I
Yeah.
think I might have seen, like, somebody might have tweeted, like, I don't know, the whole sort of, like, current, like, chaotic metalcore scene, like, bands that are, like, adjacent to, like, Callous Cowboys and stuff, like, if any of those bands had the Saint Anger snare, it'd be awesome.
Mhm.
Like, it's just, like yeah, that sound would be, like, sought after by certain bands, so
Yeah.
well, I had no idea this would turn into a Saint Anger podcast, but,
You never know. Like, yeah, I have a sicko brain. I have broken music writer brain, so I'll always I'll turn a topic to something completely different every time.
yeah, so I'm gonna try to, like, make this smooth transition. So
Yeah,
speaking of records that are kind of train wrecks, "Whenever If Ever" by The World's a Beautiful Place, which is an album I love, but I also think in a way is, like, kind of a train wreck. And so, it's a stretch, but I'm using that to go from Saint Anger.
yeah. No,
But I
we absolutely have to talk about this record. So it's a
yeah.
good one to bring up.
So the reason I say that because again, I love this record and I'm not trying to be negative, but I feel like it kind of sounds like a band that like is gonna fall off the tracks at any moment. Like it's like it's very different from a record like Is Survived by Our Greatest Generation, which is like these sort of like near perfect records. It's like it's a very, very imperfect record, I think. Um
Yeah,
and it's like it literally was a band in transition. I mean, Tom, the singer, was on his way out, and Dave Bello was on his way in, and they're both on the record. And it's the last album I think with screaming from Greg Horrible. And I think he played guitar on the next one, but like that sort of like that those screamy roots they had kind of disappeared after this one. But then it has like some of the best World Is songs ever. Like, I mean, obviously, Getting Soda's like iconic, like it's their theme song. I love Gig Life. Um, Picture of a Tree, like absolute classic song. Like it's like this record that's just going in a million different directions. The band members are literally coming and going, and it's just got these moments of absolute brilliance on it. And I think it's no surprise that and then also like seeing this tour. I mean, this was the tour they did that infamous Cameo Gallery show in Brooklyn. Do you
hmm
know about that show? I assume, yeah. Um, like they like made a bunch of noise and then left after two songs. Like that was what you maybe were gonna get at a World Is show. And then this was like they brought on that spoken word guy, Chris, around this time, and it was like some world age shows were like lots of spoken word, and others were like beautiful post rock. And it was just
Yeah.
like they were this unpredictable band that was like you could like see a show that would change your life, or you could be like, they kind of sucked last night. Um, and it was like this amazing time for this band, and it's one of the reasons I love them, because they're just not like anybody else in the world. Everything they do, they're funny, they're serious. Like their last record is like ridiculous. Like I love all the like proggy like Circa Survive guitars and stuff. But yeah, they just you never know what you're gonna get from them, and I think they're not for everyone. And I mean, even with like their band name, it's like it's kind of antagonizing. Like they force
Mhm.
you to tell somebody like, oh, you should really check out The World Is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die.
Yeah.
Like, but it's like if you get past all that, or if you just eat all that up, like they're for you. They're the perfect band. So
Yeah, like it is a chaotic record, but like in a good way for me. I love that it's always kind of like teetering on like the edge of like just implosion. I
mhm.
think I wrote that review for Absolute Punk, and I kind of like made the connection to like the album art where it's like the childhood photo of it's someone in the band. I can't recall who it is, but I think it's someone in the band as a child jumping off the cliff. And like I feel like that album kind of like personifies that image you see the cover of Whenever If Ever. I mean, the first track is amazing. It kind of sets the tone, and like you said, like Gig Life and Getting Sodas are just kind of like staples of that band. And you know they had like a shitheel personality with all the April Fools jokes
Mhm.
and the April Fools like merch they would put out. And yeah, like you said, like they just make noise, and sometimes they'd put on like a really like terrible show on purpose and just whatever it was. Um, yeah, a lot of not like disarray, but like you said, like a lot of like in and out, and so which I think led to that creativity of like that kind of like controlled chaos of the sound of that record. And like it definitely gets harnessed on Harmlessness, which I think is most people's favorite record. I think Illusory Walls, the most recent one, is their best record. It's so tight and concise while still being The World Is. And really that's just Chris. Like I think he really wrote and does all the guitar on that record.
Mhm.
And David's lyrics are great. I could talk about that record forever, but I won't. But we'll stick on topic for this one. But I remember getting the advance for this and putting it on, just being like obsessed with it. Like I was like, this it was like if it wasn't for like Sunbather and Is Survived By coming out, that probably would have been like my album of the year in 2013. And I just remember listening to it all the time. And I think it's exactly what you described. Like I had no idea the direction this record was going at any time. And like even if I put it on now, like I'll be like, oh, I forgot there was even that moment, or like
Yeah.
that keychain, or like they just go like
Mhm.
this fill. And it's like, yeah, and yeah, Getting Sodas and Gig Life, like they are very emotional songs for me. And it's just like I have a lot of good memories of this record, and I wish they were coming a little bit closer to my home state of Indianapolis so I could see them on tour with. I love that For Your Health, and I think in 10 years when we talk about For Your Health and Callous Cowboys on this podcast,
I think
I'll be,
100%.
but
Yeah.
it's like one of the next generation. But I'm excited to hopefully catch some good live videos that someone takes and puts on YouTube or on Twitter, because I do want to see like this current iteration of the lineup, because they're essentially like a 5 piece now. And like if they're going to bring additional touring musicians, or just how it's going to work. And I'm really curious to see that. But this is like this is an iconic record for me. I think when a lot of people think of top shelf records, this is the first record they think of. This and The Lack Long After, I think, are the top two top shelf records. Whether whether the label agrees with that or not, I think those are like, or like whatever they're trying to strive for now. Like I don't never want to pigeonhole any of these labels, because like
Right.
they do such a good job of diversifying, not just being one thing.
But that was the time. I mean, even like Top Shelf had, quote tweeted like this list, and like Kevin was like 2013 was that year. Like
It was.
even Kevin is like, yeah, that was something was in the water, and they were. I mean, Top Shelf, like before this all popped off, like Top Shelf was one of those labels where I was like, if they put it out, you listen to it. Like they were capturing this scene before a lot of people caught on, and finding like, and they had like underrated bands who kind of never made it out, like We Were Skeletons, like
Hmm.
if you remember them, and
I
like
do.
actually on this list, Caravels was on Top Shelf. Do you know that record? Like,
I,
is that
I owned that record. It is
awesome?
incredibly underrated.
Yeah,
It's a great record.
that's like when I went back and listened to all these. That I'm just like similar to Comadre. I'm like, I mean, I think I saw them on tour with Touche and Me Without You, so they were like, kind of could have been like quote unquote next for like that sort of
Hmm.
type of post hardcore, but then they broke up instead and never made a second full length. And um, but yeah, it was like, and State Faults too. Like they obviously eventually came back, but having gone on hiatus after Resonate, Desperate, like um, State Faults and Caravels, I feel like both were these. They felt like they could have been like the next Touche and Pianos and La Dispute type bands, but instead, one broke up forever. And although Caravels briefly reunited, one mainly broke up, and then the other took 6 years to make a record.
I think, and the thing with
So,
St. Faults is I think their record is done. I have no idea what's going on with it, but it's like it's done.
oh, the new one, yeah,
I just want to like who knows what's going on, but I am so ready for new St. Faults because
me too.
the Clairvoyance is such a good
It
record.
was awesome, yeah, and that's another Jack Shirley produced. Yeah, it's like that's crazy to think. Jack Shirley did the State Faults record the same year as Sunbather.
Hmm.
Like I want everybody who likes Sunbather to listen to State Faults and Comadre. That's your homework, like
Yeah,
um,
that's good homework.
but
That'll be
yeah.
fun.
Another one I want to bring up before we gotta go, one we haven't touched on yet somehow. We talk a lot about Floral Green, but Title Fight put out the Spring Songs EP in 2013, and just 4 songs. But I put it on the list. I might have been the only EP on the list, but it's really, I think, pivotal for Title Fight. It was done with Will Yip. It was done like to 2-inch tape. It came out on Revelation Records rather than Side One, which I think were still on technically at the time. But it was like clearly like Title Fight kind of getting back to like their hardcore roots, and like let's just do like an analog recording on, put it out on Rev. um and it's like, yeah, it had that like punkier production that they did, but it was like it had that indie rock influence that Floor Green had. Like, I mean, Be a Toy, I think, just might be one of the best Title Fight songs ever. And then the others are like they're getting into slowcore and they're still doing the shoegaze thing. And um, I just think that's such like a pivotal EP for them, and it sounds so different than all of their full lengths. And I just think it's like almost like an overlooked gem in their discography, because especially now in the streaming era, like Spotify thinks EPs and singles should be in the same section, which
Yeah,
makes no sense. So it's like, I wonder, like, do people even like fully click that? Like, because I kind of just look at what's on the albums. I feel like, so I just feel like it gets overlooked as such a special Title Fight release just because it's an EP and it's great.
yeah. I had that on 7 inch when I still collected 7 inches. Remember directly ordering it from Rev. So you gotta have a little hardcore in it if you're putting it on Revelation
Yeah,
Records.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I love that. It was a really fun release to purchase, and I think that same year for Record Store Day was it 2012 or 2013? They did the split with Touche where they covered each other's songs too.
Hmm.
So it was a 7 inch heavy year for Title Five before Hyperview. But yeah, this is like the last of like Title Fight, like the Title Fight like that people kind of like grew up with before they fully transitioned into what they were doing with Hyperview. And so
Hmm.
you're right, it is like a lost relic of that time. Um, so hopefully the people who listen to this will scroll down to the singles section on Apple Music or Spotify and give it a spin. Because yeah, you're right. Be a Toy is like top tier Title Fight.
Hmm. I'd like to petition Spotify to do albums and EPs together. Like that's, I mean, I guess it depends on the EP. Like if it's like, there should be like a differentiation between like EP, like just a short, great release, and like EP 4 songs that are going to be on our next record. There should be like but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not going to work for
No,
Spotify
no,
and
no.
not going to make that suggestion, but
I didn't want to talk about Drug Church because
oh
they're
yeah, go
like
for it.
I think out of like current bands right now, they're like one of the more popular ones, which I never saw coming. Like they're going on that that their co-headlining tour with Prince
Prince
Daddy,
Daddy, yeah.
and they're bringing out Anxious, which is sick, and they're
Hmm.
actually coming here, so I will be wearing my mesh shorts in the pit. But Paul Walker was such a. If you had told me in 2013 that the band Drug Church would put out a record called Paul Walker of a crying kid at their birthday party, it was gonna be like, oh yeah, they're gonna put out like 4 other super awesome records. I wouldn't have believed you. I love the record, but they never seemed like they seemed like how Patrick is. I just thought it was just gonna be like a one and done thing before like Self Defense or like another project because he has his hands in so many things. But I just because I love talking about Drug Church because the first time I heard him was that 7-inch that No Sleep put out, and the first song I ever heard was Mohawk, which is where Patrick got Jeremy to scream, "I'm in awe of mountain bridges, some suspension bridges, and perfect breasts." And until you hear Jeremy Ball with Touche Amore scream "perfect breasts," you have not listened to hardcore music or Drug Church. That's like the. It's just what an introduction to a band for that song. But I love Paul Walker, and they've improved so much as a band. Like where they're like Cheer was like one of the best records, and Hygiene got like super like great praise from like a lot of different sites. And I just never thought I'd see like Hygiene by a band called Drug Church being praised on paste.com. like, so I
Yeah.
just want to throw that record out because that's one record from that era that while I love, that's what like a band I thought was gonna be like, this will probably be the only Drug Church record that ever comes out.
I mean, when that came out, I remember just being like, "Oh, it's a self defense family side project." You
Mm-hmm.
know, like now it's like Drug Church. I feel like has surpassed self defense,
Oh, absolutely.
and I never would have guessed that they would become what they became. Like as you said, I think Cheer is really the moment where like Drug Church really level up and just become like a truly great band that stands out. And I love Hygiene. I think it's like just as good as Cheer, and they apparently are working on a new record now. And I was just listening to Patrick talk about it on another podcast, and he said something. He was like, "I'm not singing on it unless every song's a single." He's like, "I don't want any interludes. I don't want like I don't care about like an album type thing. I just want every song to be a hit." And I'm like, "That's great because that's what Drug Church is for." You know, like they're just like the most fun band, most high energy band, and that's which is so different from Self Defense Family.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I love Drug Church so much. I think, I mean, you know, I think I agree. I never would have guessed in 2013 that in 2023, Drug Church would be not just like one of the biggest bands in their genre, but also like one of my favorite bands. Um, but I think they got so much better. They were already great, but they just got so much better. And I also think like, you know, it's like the timing is right, you know, and I think living in this post turnstile world, like anything, like because they're hardcore adjacent, but they're really catchy. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're really hitting in this moment where people are like kind of fiending for exactly what they're doing. So I think it's like a mix of they're better than ever and the timing is right, and that's just cool when that happens.
Yeah, the first time I listened to their 7-inch, I didn't even know that it was Patrick from Self Defense. I was like, I
Hmm.
put it on. I just like blind bought it because it was No Sleep, and then during that time, I'd almost buy anything No Sleep put out. I remember putting that on. I was just like, this sounds so familiar. Like, what is this voice? Because I'm a
Hmm.
huge Self Defense Family fan or End of the Year fan, and then once I looked it up, I was like, holy shit! Like that's another reason why exactly what you said. Like that's why I thought it was gonna be like a kind of like a one and done type of thing because like Self Defense Family seemed like the priority, and it might still be. Who knows what his priorities are these days? He's got, like I said, he's got his comic books, he's got his writing, he's got a bunch of things. I would kill for a new Self Defense Family record though. But if they
Yeah,
never
I think he did say that like that band is always working on stuff. So.
and if they never put out another record, the last one they put out is like the perfect way for them to go out if they decide to go out because that's
Mhm.
I love that record. The money's in Drug Church, baby. You gotta keep riding that train.
Yeah, I mean it's you know that they're hot right now. So, hey, before we go, any other records you want to talk about? We haven't, including records that aren't on the list from that year.
You know, not really. I think we covered a lot of like the big ones.
Hmm.
Yeah, 2013 was just a very like crazy, overwhelmingly great year of like music that would just like define an entire era, generation of music fans, and like influence what people listen to. Um, So it's just kind of it's fun to reminisce, and it's awesome that like a lot of these bands are still active because I feel like a lot of
Hmm.
times when we put out like retrospectives, is like this artist isn't active and they don't put out records. So it's nice that these bands kind of get to still get the flowers while they're still active, and just know like how well loved and appreciated they've been over the last 10 years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also really interesting, just on that similar note, to just look at like they're still here and like the world is even nicer to these bands than it was then, because
Hmm.
like 2013, it was all kind of starting that these bands would be taken seriously. Like I remember, like I just felt like every time Pitchfork posted another band from this world, each one was like a big deal. Like I was like, oh, like
Hmm.
Pitchfork covers Tiger's Jaw now, like Pitchfork
Yeah.
covers Balance and Composure now, like so it was like it almost felt like each band had to individually cross the line kind of into like,
Hmm.
but now it's just like these bands are still around. They're bigger than ever. They're a lot of them are like more loved than ever. Um, and it's interesting to compare to like the previous generation of like emo and post hardcore and stuff. Because like if we were to be having this conversation, like okay, so like the records that turned 20 this year from this world, like Artists in the Ambulance, War All the Time, like that stuff. If you were to talk about those in 2013, it'd be like those bands are broken up. The world has moved on from that kind of music.
Hmm.
Like though they felt more old, I think, in 2013 than these do now. Because it's
Yeah.
almost like that whole scene was kind of like this rise and fall, and this scene has kind of been more like a steady climb.
And I'm gonna. This could be way off base, but I'm gonna say it's because the major labels did not get their paws into this like they
I
did
think that's like very on
with
base.
Thrice and Thursday, and
Yeah.
when like that style like post hardcore was popular in the early 2000s, like every major label was trying to sign those bands or like bands that sounded like them but weren't good. And I mean, major labels, man, that you know it, like they spit out these type of bands so quickly, and it's hard to recover from that. Um, and I guess it's just maybe a blessing in disguise that major labels never got hip to the cause during this era to more or less like muddy the waters or just make it more
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking, I was so did you saw that, Boy Genius signed to Interscope? So, like, Julian Baker was on 6131, which Joyce Manor and Touche Amore were also on. So I'm like, is Julian Baker, like, technically the first, like, emo revival act on a major? Like, is that, like, kind of the
She might be. She might
Yeah.
be. Yeah, that's I'm excited for that record. I won't, we
Me
won't,
too.
but
Those singles are all really good.
yeah, Interscope is interesting because I definitely have the belief that Phoebe Bridgers' next record is going to be on a major label. While
That'd be my guess.
I think Julian Baker and Lucy Dacus will stay. With I think aren't they both on Matador, or maybe Lucy Dacus
I
is on
think
Merge. But regardless, Matador and
yeah.
Merge are like label adjacent to me, anyways. Um,
Anyway, Drew, thanks so much for coming on the
oh
show. It's
yeah,
been a blast.
thanks for finally having me. I'm glad I finally got to do this. This is awesome.
Yeah, we should do it again.
We definitely will. Yeah. All right. Take it easy, man. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much to Drew. Thanks for listening. You can check out all the albums on this list. It's called 25 Classic Emo and Post Hardcore Albums Turning 10 in 2023. It's on BrooklynVegan.com. We've also included the link in the episode description. And hey, if you like what you heard, please give us a good rating. It doesn't take long and it goes a long way. It helps us get out there. Tell your friends about us, subscribe. It really helps. Thanks so much. See you next time.